The truth will set you free, but first it'll tick you off. That is the really famous quote by Gloria Steinem. But why exactly is that? Why is it that so often the truth does tick us off? Well, one reason is how much we've invested in whatever it was that ended up not being the truth. Now, sometimes it is some external person, place, thing, or situation, and we end up feeling manipulated in some way. But more often, it is us that hasn't wanted to look at very often the very clear signs as to what is really going on. The truth has been hanging in the air, perhaps for a while. It's just that now we've had a moment where it feels like it changes things because we're finally ready to accept the truth, to accept the ways that perhaps we've been manipulating ourselves. On Monday, October 13th, Pluto will officially go direct after being retrograde for about the last 5 months. And Pluto does retrograde for about 5 months every year. But it really is whenever a planet is changing directions that first that planet stands still in the sky. That is when that planet is at the height of its power. It is closer to the Earth than it might otherwise be. And with Pluto being perhaps one of the big, most powerful players of the main planets of the astrological zodiac, well, we tend to feel this shift. It tends to be notable, and it tends to be something that feels as if now having glimpsed, having known, in some cases having accepted the truth, well, where does that leave us? Well, really, that leaves us in a place of empowerment, although it may not feel like that in the given moment. It is when Pluto is changing directions that it feels like there's so much fraughtness, there's so much emotion that it comes hand in hand with frustration as well, but it's almost like that's necessary. It helps us to identify where our power is, but more importantly, where our power is not. And where it is not, where it is that perhaps we were trying to make it something that we could control, well, that's where we realize we've been wasting a whole lot of energy towards no good. And where it is perhaps now, having looked at the truth, having accepted some truth, we find ourselves disappointed. Well, that really is the beginning of humility, and a more genuine kind of love can start to foster. Love for ourselves, love for our circumstances, and love for another might be part of the gift of this time. It just might not feel like that right away. And in having accepted some truth, after walking a journey, especially over the course of a week like this, in the first days of Pluto going direct, it is when we get to that point of acceptance that it ends up being that much more of a blessing. This is where we find the freedom that truth brings. Because if it's true, it means it's honest. And if it's honest, it means that it's real. And it means that whatever it is that we're showing up for, that we're investing in, that we believe, it is rooted in some reality. And it is there as an anchor in reality that we're able to manifest something that is rooted in ultimately self-respect. It is by appreciating the truth of a given situation that, yes, it may tick us off, and yet it's exactly what it is we need to build a life that feels uniquely, authentically, and powerfully our own. Hello, fabulous friends, fans, and superstars. Welcome to your horoscope for the week of October 12th, 2025. I am your astrologer, Nadiya Shah. Thank you for being here. Absolutely incredible programs are starting this November only at synchronicityuniversity.com. You've got a little time left to choose your tuition rate as low as just $5 a class to learn from big dog astrologers, including Mark Lawrenson, myself as well, and these incredible speakers we have as part of a jam-packed speaker series only this November at synchronicityuniversity.com. Links below. My dear friend Patricia Bell and I recently sat in conversation as part of Synchronicity Web TV here on my YouTube channel, and she is the author of the book Timeless Love. And this is a book that really comes down to being about grief. And during that interview, Patricia said something fascinating. She said that underneath anger is ultimately grief. Anger serves as the armor to grief that has not been addressed, not been dealt with, not been looked at. And therefore, because we haven't done either of those, it hasn't been healed. And there are times when we certainly can move through life from that place. Maybe we're holding on to certain anger, certain frustration, a certain sense of what should be, what could be, what should be different in our lives. But when we do that, we miss a real opportunity. And the opportunity is to contemplate, to consider how whatever might be happening is actually part of helping us to become more wise in some way and even become more loving as well. With Pluto going direct, there are very likely going to be people out there that we see, perhaps part of the collective, perhaps within ourselves. This is what we see for ourselves within ourselves now, where it is that we have been hiding our grief from ourselves, where it is that perhaps we've taken on certain armor, we've taken on certain protective gear, but ultimately it is part of holding our heart back. It is a part of limiting the love that we experience from others, from the universe, and also from ourselves as well. With Pluto going direct, we are about to get honest, even if it's hard. And getting honest about what we're truly angry about, not just what we're performing anger about, well, that is the first step towards actually healing grief, a deeper grief that might be stirring for some of us now. Whenever it is that Pluto stands still in the sky, gearing up to go direct, as is the case as we start this week, it becomes really important to provide grace to yourself and to others, because a lot of us are feeling things in a magnified sense. There's that much more energy that feels like it's vibrating, and it is as if any little thing can have us needing to see, feel, appreciate what's really going on under the surface. And very often stuff that we haven't wanted to look at. Ways in which we felt vulnerable, ways in which we felt unsure. Now, this is Pluto. This is the ancient god Hades, the god of the underworld. And one of the more famous stories of Hades/Pluto has to do with Persephone, right? We talk about that quite a bit here on this channel because it is such a powerful story about how Persephone, in some time frames, in some regions, she was conceptualized as kidnapped and going into the underworld. In other regions, especially of the ancient world, ancient Greece, ancient Rome, she was conceptualized as having fallen in love with Hades, having willingly gone down, and as a result, become sort of a queen of the underworld, if you will, type of figure. But one thing that's often overlooked in any of these stories is that Hades fell in love as well. And where it is that Hades came to Persephone from a place of openness, from a place of honesty, well, it makes it that much more likely that love was able to foster between the two of them. And there's one part of me that likes to think, well, look, it is the god of the underworld. This is falling in love with the bad boy, falling in love with who you think, cannot love, or at least if they do love, they're also really going to protect you, right? All these very primal urges that people sometimes have. But what's also possible with this is that Hades, in falling in love, himself feeling exposed, himself feeling vulnerable, ended up finding a safe space with Persephone. And that's what love often grants us. It sort of stands in for other types of healing that might need to take place for us. This is a very Freudian concept, if you will, right? Because Freud said that in intimacy with another person, it is actually evoking very deep feelings within us that help us to heal our relationships with our very first caregivers. That's how deep an invocation that we find when we are in a moment of intimacy with another person. And the kind of intimacy that feels like it changes us, it does so because it awakens us to perhaps emotions, memories, or even responses, however unconscious, that are very deeply rooted. And in awakening those parts of us, well, we just might learn something. We just might move forward from the parts of us that might have been holding on to hurts, perhaps for a very long time, going all the way back to the roots of this lifetime. And I would even say, if not deeper. There's something about being truly open and honest with another person that leaves us changed. The trick is, though, to make sure that we're being open and honest with someone who has either earned it or who deserves it. Because if that isn't the case, well, we end up putting ourselves in situations that sometimes, not always, but sometimes can ultimately set us up for even greater vulnerability. That sense of being exposed ultimately is meant to show us where our healing is, and that is something that only we can do. It is not for anyone else. And so I wonder, when I think about the story of Hades falling in love with Persephone, Persephone falling in love with him, and she knows her mother, Demetra, is of the earth, right? She is a fertility goddess. She is a goddess of the seasons. And it is her job to tend to the land. And when Persephone leaves, she is in such mourning that she stops doing her things that she needs to do to take care of the land very well. And so where does that leave Persephone? Where does that leave Hades? Where does that leave Demetra as well? Well, it leads them to a place where they have to find something that could be a sort of a middle ground, or at the very least a compromise of sorts. It is Demetra that may need to learn in the fact that her daughter is doing her own adult daughter thing in her own life, falling in love with someone else, some dude who lives really, really, really far away. And Demetra really, really, really misses her daughter. And yet there is something that is very right about how it is that children, especially adult children, will make their own choices, make their own decisions as they go out into the world. And that parents might not always understand them or agree with them, or as a result of choices that adults make, well, there might be a sense of some parents being disappointed or hurt by that. But is it really about the adult child, or is it really about the parent not being adaptable, being willing to change, which is ultimately a change towards a stage that is actually very natural? This idea of allowing our children to no longer stay children, but to explore adulthood. Now, take a minute to own some of these energies, right? Instead of projecting them out towards certain relationships, that could be how this energy manifests for some of us out there. But take a moment to consider how it is and where it is we feel that push and pull within us. That sense that we would like to have that comfort, that safety of being cared for, and how it is and where it is that we might find that. How is it different? How is it the same? Where are we seeking a parent? Where are we seeking a lover, if not a great love? And what is the sacrifice involved in that? There are certain sacrifices that we will take on very willingly. And that is because we believe we are going to gain more than what it is that we might think we might lose. Even though the dominant energy right out of the gate is all about Pluto, I do think that a lot of these deeper understandings that we're discussing here are going to be furthered by what it is that Venus is doing under the same sky. As we begin this week, it is going to be on Monday that Venus will change signs, moving into one of its home signs of Libras. This is where Venus is particularly strong. Because she's home, right? She feels especially comfortable. She's able to bring forward her energy that much more readily, especially where it comes to higher forms of beauty, the beauty of thought, the beauty of ideas, of concepts, of theories, the beauty of form, of architecture, of balance, of symmetry. But right out of the gate, as soon as Venus does change signs, very quickly sets up to stand across the sky from Neptune. And that opposition takes place either Late Monday in the Americas or Tuesday in most of the world is when that energy will perfect. And that is an energy of some disappointment, some uncertainty, some sense of needing to acknowledge some loss that is there, but the loss might be necessary if we are going to know love more deeply. Now, that might be romantic love, it might be love for self, it might be love for an endeavor. But it's almost like many of us might be feeling like we're making a choice. And it feels that much more intense, that much more fraught, because all of this is happening under the light of Pluto stationary direct at the beginning of the week. But it is as we dip into Tuesday, even as late as Wednesday, depending on where you are on the planet, that we are going to have this very special grand trine energy. It is nothing less than Venus, Uranus, and Pluto setting up a supremely harmonious, larger configuration. The energy of Venus and Uranus brings with it lightness and ease and romantic surprise. But Pluto adds intensity. It adds focus. It adds a sense that what takes us by surprise can also serve as meaningful and transformative in our lives. And because Pluto is slowly gaining traction at this point, it is a love that is helping us to get really honest, to dig very deep within ourselves so that we understand, as Rumi famously said, your task is not to go out and seek love, but to understand the barriers within your heart to it. And I think so much of what this sky is saying, especially in the first days of this week, is we gain powerful insights into those very barriers that we've built up. Whether it is within our established relationships and the connections we have with people where there already is a measure of trust, or whether it is taking place with new people that might be entering now. That surprise, that insight that feels like it's unexpected and it shows up, it just might be exactly what it is that we need to feel ourselves move towards a clean slate of sorts. And that clean slate might be being honest with ourselves about where we are in love and how we feel about it, being honest with ourselves about how we interact with others and whether or not it's working for us, be honest with ourselves about where some of our own expectations have been reasonable and where they have not. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't also say, I'm looking at all this Pluto, this Venus energy in the first days of this week, and I'm thinking this just might be a very important decision that some of us are making. And it is a decision that is rooted in finally being honest with ourselves, finally facing some truth. And it might be hard, especially where it comes to relationships where we've invested a lot of ourselves, whether it's a lot of time, a lot of thought, a lot of mental energy, a lot of physical presence, perhaps even a lot in terms of our finances and the other types of sacrifices we might have made in order to try and make some relationship work, some connection to blossom. But it is the energy at the start of the week that says we might just find ourselves at an impasse of sorts. And that might be an understanding that there's only so much we can do. At some point, the other person has to meet us, either halfway or at least along that same road, in order for any alliance to have any kind of real chance to move forward. And in that way, we just might find a new understanding where relationships are right. We are clearing the air. We're facing our disappointments, yes, but at least we're able to speak of them. We're able to talk about them, find a deeper understanding. In particular, I'm thinking about, Venus and Libra. Libra is an air sign. Air is all about talking. It is about mind level understandings. And finally, giving words to heart so that we can see life from another perspective, to allow ourselves to be changed by another through that love that we might experience through an honest exchange. Approaching that honest exchange might be hard. It might feel like we are vulnerable, we are exposed, or we're coming right up against where it is perhaps we had some expectations that were not reasonable of ourselves or of others. But whatever truth it is that might be uncomfortable to embrace, it is going to be part of setting us free. We're feeling all the energy of Pluto, the messiness of Pluto station. But what we also have is Pluto going direct. What we also have is the messiness of Venus opposite Neptune and all the disappointment wrapped up in that. But what we also get is Venus trine Uranus, which is about finally feeling light, finally feeling free, understanding how truth can really lighten our load when we're no longer filling in blanks or investing in ultimately what we hope could be there, the potential, and in some cases, even the lies that we might have told ourselves. Where is it now that we might be ready to be more honest with us? Well, all of that awareness might stir, especially in the first part of this week. Now, as I said, for most of us, this is going to play out in terms of relationships, but there is going to be a percentage out there for whom this isn't so much about what's happening with another, but rather what's happening within us, our relationship with ourselves, meeting ourselves halfway, approaching our own lives and our own self-concept from a more balanced perspective. And I would also add, sometimes it is other people in their unconsciousness behaving as they need to, doing what they need to do, that it ends up being exactly what we need. Even if it's uncomfortable, it puts us on a path towards the realizations that perhaps are long overdue, that perhaps we're ready for in some way. Late Thursday in some parts of the Americas, but Friday in most of the world is when we are going to have the sun perfect a conversation of tension with Jupiter, called a square. And this is a phenomenon that happens about twice a year. And when it occurs, it can be a time of overestimating, overpromising, but more than anything, it is overconfidence. Now, for some, that might not be a bad thing, right? There are some who think that any aspect of Jupiter is going to be a good thing. But where it is that perhaps we are not seeing things from that very balanced perspective that's going to help us most in this moment, well, that is where seeing things in an almost fantastical way, telling ourselves absolutely we can meet some responsibility that appears to be new, but not being able or willing to be honest with ourselves about where it is perhaps that we might be a little bit in over our heads. Well, even if we're honest about that in the moment or not, it's amazing how the truth of what we feel, it has a way of showing up. It has a way of coming forward. Now, I'm all for believing in yourself, bragging. This is a very bragging kind of energy, but it's energy of action as opposed to the energy we had last week with Mercury square Jupiter. Now that is very much about the overpromising, how words can become bigger than reality. In this case, it is self-concept becoming bigger. It means that if it is that we're overpromising, we are doing so from a very sincere place within us, really believing we're able to meet some moment, meet some call, some responsibility. But where it is that perhaps there is a process as to whom it is that we are to be, whom it is that we are to become, the path that is going to get us where we want to go, and we have a desire to skip over certain steps. That is where the universe is likely to show us something about where it is that we are missing steps that actually could be really valuable. Every step is there for a reason, and every step prepares us for the next and for the next. And in many ways, you are, all of us are, in our own individual journeys, exactly where it is that is right for us to be in this given moment. Now, the next moment might be completely different, but it's also possible that we want the next moment to be completely different, but we're not there just yet. And so a lot of this is going to depend on your unique circumstances, but it does become important to check in with yourself, for all of us too, so that we're not telling ourselves what it is that we want to believe, so that we're not believing things about ourselves, whether they are positive things, potential, or whether they are things that maybe are not so positive. Maybe we're not giving ourselves nearly enough grace, nearly enough slack. It becomes really important to just, at the very least, try to be mindful of which it is for us. Because there's not a whole lot of seeing things from a measured place, especially as we start moving later into the week with the Sun square Jupiter. However, there is a sense of the possible. There is a sense of us being encouraged to believe. But are we going to believe in us jumping ahead 20 steps, or are we going to believe in the journey itself? And so as much as this week might feel like a bit of a roller coaster, as over optimistic we might find ourselves, especially as we move late into the week, it might be a good idea to consider what it is new that we want to implement, put into place, or initiate now. Because once Mercury goes into shadow, whatever we think is showing up and we think that's it, we just might see it very differently in the weeks and even months ahead as part of the larger Mercury retrograde season. And I'll talk a lot more about that once it is that we get to next week and every step of the way. What I love about this week for us, there's so much here. It's a powerful and meaningful astrological moment. Well, I'm going to say, I think the very big news this week is Pluto going direct. Pluto going direct is a big shift of an energy. And it is this very profound, powerful energy of a truth that reaches very deep within, that helps us to see ourselves and perhaps many of our circumstances very differently in an instant, and how it is that that changes our pathway quite literally forward as Pluto goes forward. Well, all of these feelings and insights are going to stir very strongly for so many of us out there, where it is that we've been caught up in an experience at a moment that ultimately isn't just illusionary, but also might be manipulative towards ourselves or from another. At least with Pluto going direct, we're able to see it that much more clearly and that much more readily. And where it is perhaps that we have been afraid to move forward, and that is the truth that we are meant to uncover now, well, that truth will feel that much more clearer to see, to acknowledge, and to embrace. Regardless, though, remember, whatever transpires, it is all part of helping us to move in a direction of greater wisdom, of greater love. But that involves considering how it is that whatever your relationship to the sky is, well, it speaks to how life is happening for you to be more than you were before, to become something that you feel is more of a representation of the best of you. All of life is conspiring to help you to do that, even the stuff that feels tough, especially the stuff that feels tough, because it is there that we see beyond some illusion, some wish, and some hope, and instead get to some nitty-gritty. And even in that which we did not want to see, we just might find beauty there. We just might find grace. Well, thank you so much for watching. What do you love about this week? Let me know in the comments below. I love reading you guys, and to prove it to you, here's some of my most recent favorite comments. Thank you to everybody who likes, who comments, who subscribes, who shares, who thumbs up. All of it means so much. I'm so grateful for you. Thank you. And of course, if you want to know how all this wonderful stuff this week speaks to you in your sign, log on to NadiyaShahSuperstars.com, where you get expanded exclusive video scopes each and every week for as low as just $3 a month, which choose your membership rate. Higher tiers get you things like all access passes to Synchronicity University events, consultations with me, and so much more. All of this in the Superstar space at NadiyaShahSuperstars.com or thefutureismagical.com. Links below. Synchronicity University is proud to present some absolutely incredible programs that are going to be launching really soon. I mean, we are talking November. We are talking just a couple of weeks from now as we begin this week. So you've got just a couple of weeks left to choose your tuition rate as low as just $5 a class, an unheard of rate to learn from some of these incredible astrologers. I am going to start with my own class. It is Past Lives in Astrology, Part 3. And this is part of a larger 6-part course that I'm teaching. If you were with us for the first but not the second, or you haven't been with us for the first or the second so far, you will be able to purchase those as an add-on for as low as $5 a class as well. So you'll be able to have that as an add-on should you want. However, if you only want to take this course, you would be very welcome to do that as well. And this is where we're going to go further with understanding past lives in the astrology chart, understanding the nuances that are playing out and how there are distinctions between the different placements, whether it's house, whether it's rulership, whether it's planets residing in one of the known as past life houses, whether it has to do with the South Node or with Neptune and so much more. We are going to explore it all, one class at a time and one course at a time as well. So again, this is going to be the third larger installment, the third course as part of 6 courses on past lives and astrology chart. And I know so many of you out there, you just love it. Like I see how popular this is. I see how much you love wanting these greater insights into seeing past lives in the astrology chart. And your trust means so much to me. So you can learn so much more about this course. You can sign up now. Again, as low as just $5 a class over at synchronicityuniversity.com. Links below. Synchronicity University is proud to present one of our most popular teachers is back at Synchronicity University. It is the one and only Mark Lawrenson, the principal of the Sydney School of Astrology. Now, Mark is an absolute force, I will tell you. He is famous in Australia, and it was so nice getting to know him on my recent trip back in January as part of the FAA conference that took place out there. It really was such a special event, and of course, he was a superstar there. But for all that, yeah, he's coming back to Synchronicity University. And this is all about the astrology of intimacy. And that can show up in terms of love, that can show up in terms of physical intimacy, and all the other layers in which we understand sensuality and connecting with another person, especially romantically. He brings such insight, such understanding. And I will tell you, every time I talk to Mark, I come away feeling like a better astrologer, feeling like I understand my chart in a different way, a more nuanced way, a deeper way. And that makes me better. That makes me able to give that much more in my own practice to others. And I know that so many students feel the same way. There's a very good reason why he is one of our most popular teachers over at synchronicityuniversity.com. And so do have a look at his course. You've got a couple of weeks left to choose your tuition rate, as low as just $5 a class. And it is only at Synchronicity University that Mark Lawrenson teaches at that low a rate. There is nowhere else that you are going to be able to learn from him at that low a rate. But it is all part of the mandate of Synchronicity University to make quality astrology available to the masses. And thank you so much for supporting our teachers, but I know that you guys get a lot out of it as well, like learning from Mark Lawrenson, the one and only. So you can learn a lot more about this course, learn all about sensuality, sexuality, intimacy, love, and so much more only from Mark Lawrenson, only at synchronicityuniversity.com. Links below. Synchronicity University is proud to present an absolutely incredible November speaker series. And you've got just a couple of weeks left to choose your tuition rate, as low as just $5 a class, to learn from these incredible astrologers. I'm so excited to celebrate them with you. I will start with Ashley Scott. Now, Ashley is somebody that I also got to know in Australia when I was there in January, although she is American. And she has such a presence. She just feels healing, I will tell you. I loved being around her, the interactions I had with her. I felt better as a result. And she just brings so much love, and she has such a holistic understanding of astrology and how that shows up for us physically, emotionally, spiritually, and otherwise. She's a wonderful person to learn from, and I'm really looking forward to celebrating her with you as part of esoteric medicine of fall and winter, only as she can present it. Stephen Poplin is bringing a super popular topic, which is rectification. And so rectification is a technique that involves pinpointing a time so that you get the chart more exact. This is incredibly valuable, a technique, especially where it is that perhaps you don't know your exact time of birth, or you have a consultation with somebody who doesn't know their exact time of birth. There is a process and specific techniques that we will use as astrologers to try and get that moment as exact as possible. Now, it's one thing when somebody comes and says, I have no idea what time I was born. That's one thing. And there are certainly techniques, the rectification techniques, but you might also tap into these techniques when it is that you see a chart of somebody born right on the hour, right? So you might see a chart where somebody says, I was born at 8 p.m. Well, chances are very small that they were actually born right at 8 a.m. Chances are it was maybe a little bit before, maybe a little bit after. And so rectification techniques help you again to pinpoint the exact time. And there are different ways that astrologers will go about it. And you're going to learn so many of those techniques from Stephen as part of this talk. Shari Keller is going to teach on herbs and astrology, and she is somebody who came very highly recommended, I will say, and she brings this evolutionary perspective, but also understanding herbs, and that taps into some medicinal perspectives where it comes to astrology as well. And she brings that holistic understanding, not just physically, but also the evolutionary spiritual force behind the connection between herbs and what's happening astrologically. She's going to present about all of that and more. Luisa Arboleta is going to teach on Bazi astrology. Now, Bazi is fascinating. It is a type of Chinese astrology, we can say. And I will tell you, I actually took a course a few years back on understanding Bazi, learning Bazi, and the teacher was not very good. The teacher basically showed me what kind of teacher I don't want to be. That is the honest truth. And as a result of that experience and realizing what kind of teacher I don't want to be, it really did change my course, which I guess is what it was meant to be. But I really don't feel like I learned much or I retained much. And that is part of why I am so excited about this class, because I know that I am just so ready for someone to explain and teach Bazi in a way that is graspable, that feels that much more meaningful and applicable, especially immediately as well. And Louisa just might be that person. I'm so looking forward to this very rarely looked at topic in astrology, but fascinating as well. Jeff Grunland is going to teach on Mars to the signs and houses. Yes, Mars, super popular planet in terms of helping us to understand our power, our life force, our desire, what we're willing to fight for, and so much more. And so this is a great class, whether it is you're a beginner or whether you're seasoned, because it does take us to that place of basics, of understanding signs, of understanding house placements of Mars, and what that means for you, how this energy of agency might show up in your life uniquely, and understanding it from the perspective of the complete chart, and how it is that you might bring that wisdom and that knowledge to those that you might serve with your practice in astrology. So you can see here we've got an incredible cohort coming up this November as part of a very special speaker series only at Synchronicity University. This is the last sort of batch of classes we are going to have before the end of the year. And what a way to bring another year of Synchronicity University sort of towards the end, ending on top, as you will. And it is going to be these classes and these teachers, these speakers that are all part of that as well. So you can learn a lot more about any of these programs, including the speaker series, only at synchronicityuniversity.com. As low as just $5 a class is on now for a limited time. Links are in the description below. And a quick note that consultations are now available with me over on my website, nadiyashah.com/consultations. You can check out the link below. I've got a few slots left for October. So if you book a reading now, you should be able to get in before the month is over. And it is these slots that are available. You'll get to see my calendar. You'll get to choose exactly the time that you want based on my availability. From there, you fill out a form. You give me all the information that I might need to know before our consultation. And then you're directed to payment. Once you make payment, you will automatically be sent a Zoom link, and that confirms your time with me. And it is such a privilege. It has been so deeply meaningful to me to be doing client work again. It has honestly been life-changing. And so as much as that is part of my journey, just know that I am there in service of you and whatever it is that you feel that you need in that moment of consultation. And I'm grateful for your trust. So you can learn a lot more about consultations. You can book yours now over at my website, nadiyashah.com. Links below. And thank you. Thank you again for watching. Last time I did like a 2-week video in one, so there was not a unique video that took place last week in particular, but I'm so grateful for the enthusiasm, the love, you guys reaching out with all my heart. Thank you for that. I was at the Omega Institute. And I will tell you, this is a program that is put on every year. It is led by Maurice Fernandez. And I knew him before. I respected him before. But let me tell you, he is a force. I kid you not. He is very special in astrology, and learning more about him, but also seeing him teach, learning from him, seeing how it is that what he teaches reaches people's hearts. You know, there's a very good reason that he is one of the absolute leading evolutionary astrologers in the world today. And to have spent time with him, it is just so clearly evident why that is. He is an expert teacher and more. So I was grateful to have been part of his vision. I was grateful to learn from him. And of course, there were these huge stars there as well that I was so excited to be co-creating this experience with, including Lynn Bell and Ortili as well. Learning from them was super exciting. Now, Hannah Terajura, I'm telling you, she is right on that precipice of being a big star. I mean, she's ready. She is so ready. And what a privilege to learn from her as well. So whether you joined us in terms of being a participant or not, whether it is that you're hoping to learn from me or any of us in future, or you have in the past, just know, for all of you, thank you. Thank you so much for being a part of this experience and so much more. It is when I get out into the world, as I did this last week. I was in New York City, and so there was this lovely astrologers dinner that happened in honor of those of us who were teaching at Omega, put on by Danny Larkin. He is a legend in his own right in New York astrology and organizing astrology out there. That was so lovely of him to host that. But it was in the company of other astrologers, and then in the company of people learning astrology at the Omega Institute as well, that it really connected me so deeply to an understanding of what I do and how it reaches people. And that's always so meaningful to me. But also why what we do matters, how what we do speaks to people and speaks to them in their hearts. It is a powerful thing to consider. And I got a chance to really have the visceral reminder of that. And for that, I am so grateful. So thank you again to everybody who participated in any of those events. And thank you, everybody out there, for watching, for your patience, for your enthusiasm, and so much more. So stay tuned now for short horoscopes coming up right now. And just my heartfelt gratitude to you. It'll be a great week. Enjoy. The truth will set you free, but first it'll tick you off. That is the really famous quote by Gloria Steinem. But why exactly is that? Why is it that so often the truth does tick us off? Well, one reason is how much we've invested in whatever it was that ended up not being the truth. Now, sometimes it is some external person, place, thing, or situation, and we end up feeling manipulated in some way. But more often, it is us that hasn't wanted to look at very often the very clear signs as to what is really going on. The truth has been hanging in the air, perhaps for a while. It's just that now we've had a moment where it feels like it changes things because we're finally ready to accept the truth, to accept the ways that perhaps we've been manipulating ourselves. On Monday, October 13th, Pluto will officially go direct after being retrograde for about the last 5 months. And Pluto does retrograde for about 5 months every year. But it really is whenever a planet is changing directions that first that planet stands still in the sky. That is when that planet is at the height of its power. It is closer to the Earth than it might otherwise be. And with Pluto being perhaps one of the big, most powerful players of the main planets of the astrological zodiac, well, we tend to feel this shift. It tends to be notable, and it tends to be something that feels as if now having glimpsed, having known, in some cases having accepted the truth, well, where does that leave us? Well, really, that leaves us in a place of empowerment, although it may not feel like that in the given moment. It is when Pluto is changing directions that it feels like there's so much fraughtness, there's so much emotion that it comes hand in hand with frustration as well, but it's almost like that's necessary. It helps us to identify where our power is, but more importantly, where our power is not. And where it is not, where it is that perhaps we were trying to make it something that we could control, well, that's where we realize we've been wasting a whole lot of energy towards no good. And where it is perhaps now, having looked at the truth, having accepted some truth, we find ourselves disappointed. Well, that really is the beginning of humility, and a more genuine kind of love can start to foster. Love for ourselves, love for our circumstances, and love for another might be part of the gift of this time. It just might not feel like that right away. And in having accepted some truth, after walking a journey, especially over the course of a week like this, in the first days of Pluto going direct, it is when we get to that point of acceptance that it ends up being that much more of a blessing. This is where we find the freedom that truth brings. Because if it's true, it means it's honest. And if it's honest, it means that it's real. And it means that whatever it is that we're showing up for, that we're investing in, that we believe, it is rooted in some reality. And it is there as an anchor in reality that we're able to manifest something that is rooted in ultimately self-respect. It is by appreciating the truth of a given situation that, yes, it may tick us off, and yet it's exactly what it is we need to build a life that feels uniquely, authentically, and powerfully our own. Now, how Pluto direct speaks to you in your sign depends on your sun, moon, and rising. Take all three into consideration, synthesize the information, and make it unique to you. And of course, there are lots more horoscopes available right now over on my YouTube channel, Nadiya_Shah, and in the superstar space at thefutureismagical.com. Aries, friendships, group dynamics. In an instant, you're about to see certain dynamics very differently, perhaps a particular person very differently as well. And as you gain these very powerful insights, it is an understanding of your place in the group that changes. You're being honest with yourself about the nature of particular alliances. You can't kid yourself or tell yourself something is something other than what it actually is. Whatever it is that you're feeling, whatever stirs for you now, embrace it, because it is a part of you moving towards more genuine alliances. Taurus, career, bosses, life purpose, and it is for For some of you, going to be a time of clarity, of acceleration, and absolute commitment towards a goal or a career endeavor that you feel very committed to. But for others, this is going to be a moment of truth that changes your direction in some way, very rooted in being honest with yourself. If you have toxic relationships with bosses or people in positions of authority in your life at this time, well, you'll have to look at it in one way or another and decide whether or not that works for you and what your power is and what you might want to do next. Regardless, this is about aligning you with a path that is much more authentically yours, aligned with a sense of purpose. Gemini, long distance travel, immigration, citizenship, higher learning, and legal matters. Now, all of these might feel very imperative. They might feel as if resolving them is very much on the surface. It's got to get done. You're pouring a lot of yourself to have it get done. But what's going to be really is going to be. So it becomes really important to strive to be open to seeing what direction that just might be, but you do your best and you surrender the rest. For all that, though, this is energy that changes your relationship to the world in some way. Whether that's literal in terms of these immigration and travel matters I just mentioned, or whether it is figurative, an insight, an understanding into your political views, your philosophical or your religious or your spiritual views, where it is perhaps that you've been caught up in something that ultimately is not taking nuances into consideration where they should be. Well, this energy can be humbling, but incredibly valuable in how it is that it strengthens your relationship with the world around you. Cancer, profound change, truth, transformation, regeneration, and wealth. So for some of you, it might be that you have to pay attention to a matter related to a grant, a loan, a mortgage, a scholarship, or benefits that you qualify for. And if that's the case, you just show up, you do your best, you surrender the rest, and know that when we have such strong financial energy, the money you need is there. You just might be engaging some pretty important lessons along the way. But many Cancerians won't experience this energy financially at all, but rather you will experience this having to do with needing to understand and connect with some deeper truths within yourself, some deeper understanding of what has got to change. What is your truth? Where is it that perhaps you have betrayed your truth and where that isn't working for you anymore? Well, this will help you to summon the courage and the dedication to changing your life in a way that feels like it aligns with something truly authentic, and in that way, much more empowering. Leo, partnership and love. One-on-one alliances are covered here. And yes, for many Leos out there, this might show up in terms of whether it is love that you want or love that you have. You're getting very honest with yourself about where you are in love and how you feel about it. Where it is that another person, past or present, has not been fair with you in some way, where it is you feel that there have been experiences of manipulation perhaps, or just somebody really not being nice to you, to put it nicely, you are going to be looking at that with a much more stark honesty within yourself. And again, whether it's past or present, it is by addressing, dealing with, finding an understanding of what has been with another that ultimately does put you on a pathway towards understanding that relationships can actually be something a lot more enlightened, a lot more real, and mutually empowering. Virgo, clients, customers, coworkers, and immediate supervisors, these particular types of people might bring all the drama, a lot of the drama. They might create situations that are more complicated than they need to be. Now, for some, it isn't going to be that big a deal. It represents a moment that comes and goes. But for others, it's going to feel a whole lot more consequential than just that, regardless of what it is for you. It is about being honest with yourself about how you are actually living and the people that you're interacting with day in and day out, how you feel about them and where some of those connections, those relationships are healthy and where they're draining, where they really are not, and what is in your power to do something about or not. Now, outside of that, this can be a newfound sense of conviction, of strength to take the best of care of you. That can have you making changes, but really it's about getting to some essential understanding of self and strengthening yourself from the inside out. That becomes part of an important motivation for you now. Libra, flirtation, romance, dating is covered here. And if anybody out there might just have a flirtation that feels like a game changer, that feels as if it changes your understanding of what your heart wants, perhaps in love or in just about any area of life, it certainly is you, especially at this moment. But for all that, this energy can be rather powerful and empowering in how it is that it expands an understanding of what you want and where it is that love is going to give that to you, and where it is that romantic love is not part of giving that to you at all. Be careful about gambling. There might be a desire for windfalls. You might think something is a sure thing, but it really might not be. So pace yourself and be yourself as you navigate this time of wanting to take chances. Just make sure that they are strategic. Scorpio, home, the past, your family of origin, your living situation. And it is this energy that can help you to see your past very differently, in some cases very quickly as well. There might be a desire to create a sanctuary, sort of a home that feels that much more safe to you in some way. And yet, what we also have here is a need to accept the things that you have control over, but also the things that you don't, where it comes to where you live and what might be happening around you now. For all that, though, you might just be getting much more honest, uncovering some deeper truths about whether it's your parents or even your ancestors at this time, and where it is that you are willing to seek the love in it. You will find yourself strengthening roots in a way that helps you to feel really strong going forward from here. Sagittarius, siblings, cousins, neighbors might be bringing all the drama right about now. And sometimes it really is just kind of like for show. They're being a drama queen or king, as the case might be. But in other cases, there might be some situation that earnestly and genuinely requires attention there. And whatever it is that shows up, just your presence, your attention in and of itself can be a profound force of transformation for the better. For all that, though, some of this energy might show up in terms of what's happening with your neighbors in your neighborhood. They might be bringing the drama at this time as well, in ways that might not necessarily feel comfortable, but ultimately do help you to get honest with yourself about how you're feeling in terms of certain connections, in terms of what's yours, in terms of what isn't yours, and where it is that you want to pay attention to what's happening in your own space, in your own home now, as part of the safe space you're creating for you, knowing that you have no power, no control over what might be happening outside of that, and that really is okay. Capricorn, money you earn, money you spend, self-love and self-esteem. Pluto's an interesting energy. It is at once powerlessness, but also absolute focus that grants power as well. But in order to make the most of it, it does require a measure of strategy and self-honesty. For some Capricorns, you might be reaching that place where it comes to how you spend your money, but also how you earn your money as well, how you feel about it, where it's working for you and where it isn't. For all that, though, many Capricorns won't experience this energy financially at all, but rather having to do with getting to some core of an issue related to healthy self-love and healthy self-esteem. Regardless, with Pluto involved, a big lesson is understanding what is superficial and where it is you're pouring all of your life force in a direction that it doesn't need to go in. What's a waste? What isn't real in your life? Making that distinction helps you to very quickly appreciate all the ways in which you are personally and otherwise abundant. Aquarius, identity, who you know yourself to be, what matters to you most, what matters to you first, what is in the immediacy that shows up for you with Pluto standing still in your sign, going direct. This happens once a year. You are going to have this phenomenon for the next few years to come. We're talking all the way into, well, 2043. That's how long this larger journey is going to be at the very least. And so, yeah, you're in one of the first moments of this, but very consequential nonetheless. It is in your sign that we have Pluto standing still and going forward. And it is you that sees yourself, who you really are, differently in an instant, what your truth is, what you're going to pour yourself into, and where it is you've gotten caught up in something that is actually quite superficial. Well, at least you'll be able to see it and decide whether or not that's working for you anymore. Now, ultimately, this is part of a larger journey that's going to have you understanding what it is to be authentically you, but also what it is that really matters to you. This is an important moment as part of that larger journey. It changes your trajectory ahead. Pisces, soul, psyche, spirit, there is so much stirring within. As Pluto changes directions, it becomes really important to make sure you're getting enough rest. I mean, really, there are going to be some Pisceans who go to sleep and then they wake up and they feel like a completely different person once they do wake up. Outside of that, though, some of these energies can be quite remarkable in how it is that they help you to find healthy closures where perhaps you didn't even know that you needed them. Energetic closures at that. And ultimately, that does restore you to a sense of self, your own power, your own truth. And from there, you feel that much stronger to know something very deeply about who you are and where you're going to go next. Thank you, everybody, for watching. It'll be a great week, a great transit. Enjoy.